you turned on the right stream today. Because it's LJL, baby! Let's go! We are back again. There are 6 more days left of this summer split. That's what it's going to be. It's the summer split. And it's all kicking off. The battle is raging. And let's get into today's games. Kicking off with the Hawks versus Rascal Jesters. Burning Course CGA. What a coin flip that's going to be. Axis V3. The battle of the bottom tier. Will V3 get their first win? Who knows? And then the battle for the top. DFM versus Sengoku. It's all kicking off right now. Tell your friend. Tell your nan. Get them on the stream right now. You do not want to miss this day's action. And with me to kick it off, we have Middlecott and Oak. Blessed guys. What are you saying? How's it been?
Bro, I am so excited for not just the games that we've got today, but also to be joined by my good friend Oak. It's been so long since we've had the opportunity to cast together, and I'm so looking forward to going through the first 2 games with you.
Yeah, me too. Game number 1 in particular, Sengoku. Watching the Hawks is going to be exciting for me personally because I haven't got to cast a lot this split, and it seems like they've really taken it into themselves to pump up their gameplay, and I'm going to be able to watch that through my own eyes. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, the Fukuoka SoftBank Hawks have become the Fukuoka Terrorbirds. They are absolutely storming through most of this or these teams, and they are picking themselves up some tempo. They are closing in on Sengoku and DFM, but they're not there just yet. However, if we look at the standings, a team that is a little bit worried today, Rascal Jesters having to take on SoftBank Goals. If they pick up another loss here, they're getting dangerously close to the pack below them. Axis, CGA, and Burnicle, all 5 and 10. They're all fighting for number 6 spot. Number 7th is the place of doom. Can V3 potentially start causing some upsets?
Potentially. Unfortunately for V3, they are locked out of playoffs, but they're definitely a team that has an opportunity to play spoiler today up against Axis. With only 6 games left in this regular split, like you've already mentioned, JRL, now we're really getting into squeaky bum time, as an infamous football manager once said. These final few games that you're going to be playing are so important to determine your seeding and determining what you're doing at the end of this split.
No, indeed. It really does. Some people's splits are going to be cut short. Some people are going to go to the playoffs, and one will get to go to Worlds. But that is all in the future. Right now, you got to think about today, because today is all that matters. We live in the present, and that is what we're going to do right here, right now, going into day 16. That's 16. Yes, 1-6. We've been through a lot of games already, and we've got right now, the Hawks. I don't know why I keep saying Sengoku. You throw me off already, Oak. Versus Rascal Jesters. Let's just get it right now. Who do you think is going to win this game? Oak, you're going first.
I'm hoping for Rascal Jester. So I was a big fan of this team within spring, and Recap's my guy. He was playing Veigar a lot more than everybody else and playing it very, very well. They've started to struggle a little bit. A lot more pressure on Recap, and as the meta's kind of diverging back into some majors again, we're hoping they can pick up a little bit more steam. It's through that and the Lucian and bot side that we're really hoping they can find some play. I'm hoping they pick back up their tempo because we really do want to see a very heavy playoffs run, and Rascal Jester right now are looking like the team below the other 3.
Yeah, you talk about tempo.
And very much sort of slotting into that spot. Yeah, J-Real.
It's something that Rascal Jesters had picked up a little bit. They went 3-4 in the first round robin. They went 4-3 in the second round robin. They haven't kicked this one off with a good start. They're 0-1 so far. Middlecott, do you feel like they can maybe regain some of that?
Well, I think they absolutely have to. Obviously, top 2 is not something that they can realistically aim for right now, and unseating the Hawks is going to be a difficult task as well, considering how far behind they are. I think to a certain extent, they're kind of locked into that 4th place position unless we see some crazy stuff come out from one of the teams below them, or we see a massive drop-off for their team. Key thing for me is building up some consistent play patterns going towards playoffs. Rascal Jester, we know how good this team can be. We know how good Soul and Secret can be in the bot lane, but it hasn't quite clicked for them so far this split. So I think a strong performance up here against Hawks today would be a very good sign for this team going forward.
No, 100%. And I think the Hawks themselves, obviously, they've really impressed. They've met expectations and actually exceeded expectations that were set out for them this split. We had, obviously, the LJL podcast predicting them to be 4th Right now, they are sitting third, and they don't look too contestable, to be honest, unless they had a really bad run in this last round robin. I'm pretty sure they are solidly going to be third. With that being said, Domenico, what do you think is their key of success that they've kind of had going from that spring split where we were saying they're kind of looking like a Spearow to now looking like a Fearow?
I mean, so in terms of the top teams within the LJL, the very best have always been the teams that have been able to assert themselves of multiple places on the map, that have had a strong top lane, a strong mid lane, a strong bot lane. And to be honest, we don't really see teams like that all that often in the LGL. I mean, even if you look at a team like Sengoku, I think that team is a hell of a lot more about mid and bot lane than it is about the top side. But the Hawks have kind of got strength everywhere. Kinatsu has really tightened up his play and become a very strong top laner on a lot of these meta picks like the Gnar, the Gwen, and the GP. Recap is really starting to come into his own as a proper carry threat for this team. Not Recap, Dasher finally feels like he's got a team around him to back up the strong performance that this guy has always been putting in. And Marble has really evolved into actually a pretty good AD carry in a league of pretty good AD carries. His DPM numbers aren't amazing, but when you're playing with two other AD carries on your team, that's to be expected. But the key thing for me is that he has the lowest deaths out of any AD carry in the LGL. This guy doesn't die, he doesn't give over unnecessary advantages, and that means he can be that consistent threat in the team fights.
And that's really cool to see because AD carries like Zeri, Lucian, and Kalista are holding a firm grasp on our LJL specific meta. They see a lot of priority in general at the moment, but they're pulling a lot of bans, which means when those picks get through, you need to make sure you're performing optimally on them. Marble already coming all the way up from summer 2021, where he was in the academy. Middling performance in spring, looking good now. That's a fantastic thing to hear when we are so focused around a few of these very lane-focused picks like the Kalista.
And looking at these two teams matching up, we saw Russell Jesters actually pick up the win against the Hawks in day number 1. They are one of 3 teams to have beaten the Hawks. Sengoku and DFM are also on that list. And they are potentially going to be causing some problems for the Hawks. We'll see, though. Are they going to be the Scarecrow rather than the Jester? Is it going to be the Fukuoka SoftBank Crows? How is this one going to go? This is the decider of the best of 3 right now. They are looking to pick up this win. And I will say, I want to go back to a little bit about momentum that you kind of talked about earlier of Rascal Jesters. And I want to talk about draft specifically. Their last game against Axis, they did pick up a loss. But I will say a lot of that for me definitely came down to the comp that they decided to choose.
Yeah, you were they built this composition where they had the Gnar in the top lane, Vi in the jungle, Zilli in mid lane, and then the Lucian Nami in the bot lane. And when you look at a composition like that, it feels very, very much like Soul has so much onus to carry. I called it a 1 carry composition in the green room, and I don't think that either of you would really disagree with that too much. There's a lot of pressure on Soul, who hasn't been performing to the highest level this split. You need to spread around some of that burden. You need to get your Lydia in the mid lane to carry your burdens for you and push forward to win the game.
And in spring, actually, one of the things we saw most mid laners opting into was the scaling carry within mid. Victor, I mean, obviously we saw quite often from Recap would be that Veigar. Other picks as well would come in where wouldn't be particularly strong in early, skirmishing in around 2nd to 3rd trade got like decent, and then they'd scale very, very hard. It's something Recap was very, very good at because in spring, Rascal Jester, it was 15 minutes when they really started going because that was exactly when Recap would get on first item spike on his mid lane carries. Because the meta isn't really there anymore, we're seeing picks like Lissandra come in instead, which are whilst very skirmish orientated, don't really fit the same niche. It's put a little bit of a hole in their plans. So we're hoping maybe they can find something that slots in to work with that.
You know, we will have to see. Obviously, Russell Jess is still a pretty good team fight comp. You know, that's what they were known for in spring. They still have been able to do similar, but it's not been kind of their reliant savior. I feel like in spring, they played a lot of games a little bit to the wire, and they could bring it back in that 5v5. The Hawks, not going to give up that advantage. Ganked by hay fever as always. Once again, it happens all the time, man. But
every time
the Hawks, they're not going to give up that advantage. They have become a very, very strong unit. And I will say a lot of that is to do with their jungle mid. I think they have really been popping off. They are a bit of a ferocious duo. And Oak, do you feel like this is where they're really going to be able to pick up the win over Russell Jesters?
Oh, absolutely. I think
Oh,
even
sorry,
back in spring,
I have baited you.
Oh.
We are going into drafts. It's time. Let's get it. Game 1 of day 16. Rascal Jesters versus the Hawks. Who will win this best of 3? It's 1-1 so far. Oak, Middlecourt, take us.
Let's go, guys, into Champion Select for our first game of the day. And Oak, we are already seeing some priority towards a couple of picks you highlighted in the pre-game.
Yeah, absolutely. The Lucian and the Kalista are taken away again immediately. So surprised that we are seeing this rotation of bands coming in, but I think it's just to stop that second rotation R1, R2, or first rotation R1, R2 picks, that doubles AD carry and support coming in to really put an issue into Sengoku's Sengoku. I'm going to keep doing that. Hawks' draft.
It's going to keep happening. It's going to keep happening. We just call them the Hawks, but it's fine. It's fine. Rascal Jester focusing away the Gwen from Kinatsu, which I think makes a lot of sense, and the Poppy has just been this super dominant pick in terms of the meta, and also something that Blank has really favored himself to pick up. This AD carry here, this Civet has been rising in priority so highly on 12-13, and we've already seen some decent performances on it from Marble.
Yeah, it's such a secure pick for you now. Team fighting is almost guaranteed to skirmish well now, no matter the numbers, because of the changes that she received back in 12.13. I'm a very big fan of this champion as well, because it doesn't really seem to have any particular weak points. Mana can be an issue within lane, so we'll be watching that carefully within those first 5 minutes. But Rascal just if anything have drafted into it. When you pick this Zeri, this champion is very... It doesn't like to play aggressive within the early game. I never say that it's a weak lane. I just feel like it's unable to aggress, which can cause some uneven trades. I think Civic can actually very handily pick that apart, and very smart from Hawks to hopefully, we're going to call it here if they do decide to opt into this now, hopefully they'll hold their support pick, because I think that's really important to ensuring the Civic gets into mid-game cleanly. Yeah,
you don't want to reveal anything too early. And I mean, you kind of opt into just a mutual scaling matchup in the bot lane to a certain extent. I think Sivir and Zeri, both champions that are more than happy to get to 3 items, and then they're going to be able to pull out a load of damage in terms of the team fights. The Wukong for Hachimecha here, pretty much a standard pick this summer. No real surprise seeing that one taken away. And this Gnar for Kinatsu has been one of his favorite picks, and also one of the champions that has really dominated the meta.
Yeah, it's the highest priority top lane at the moment. Even after nerfs that we've seen on 12.13, people are still super happy to pick it, because this just means it slots in where it used to slot in before, where it's a little bit more vulnerable in lane, but you get the free scaling. Now, especially after we saw it getting a lot of B1 presence, because it was just kind of a jack of all trades, but a little bit more so in every single aspect. Now it's been nerfed, maybe a little bit more easy to pick apart in lane, but remember, they got the Gwen was taken away from the other side, so that leaves only 1 pick left. And as the prophecy foretold, the GP gets locked straight in.
It's kind of just what happens in top lane right now. One team picks Gnar, the other team picks Gangplank, and you're both kind of happy getting to team fights. The Ahri for Dasher here gives him a little bit of agency in terms of the early mid-game. I wouldn't be surprised if we see him trying to get that shove against Recap as much as possible. Start roaming towards these side lanes to get them ahead.
And this Ahri always paired up so well with Reina in terms of what he's able to slot in support. So Dash's Ahri already pretty good. I'm hoping we see the Rakan come in, maybe even the Nautilus come in to support this and play for skirmishes as much as possible, because that's really how you get this triple threat of the early game skirmishes online in Reina, Dasher, and Blank.
I mean, we could even see the Reina Rel, right? That is a champion.
Do you think we'll see it? I feel like it's going to be banned, but
I wouldn't surprise me if it does hit the ban table. It has been the most banned champion against the Hawks so far in this split. But no, Rascal Jester really doubling down the focus on Blank, removing this Skarner, removing this Vi. Champions that aren't firmly in the meta in terms of that jungle pool, but are definitely seeing some niche play.
There you go. And yeah, I think you can already see why the Skarner could be slotted in with this kind of comp. You got the move speed set up from the Sivir as well as Ahri Charm. Instead now, because of those bans, we get to kind of project what we're going to see coming in instead. So a lot of junglers taken away, but that Viego is ever present, and they've been trading these junglers away all split so far, and basically last split as well. So I wouldn't be surprised to see that locked in. The Azir, though, as this... it's the same kind of exchange. We've either been seeing this or the Corki really consistently. I think something I saw Jamada say on Div 2 and NLC was that for teams ever lacking damage, just pick the Corki.
Yeah, you kind of just lock it in. Instead, the pickup is going to be this Silas. Actually, something that we don't see too often from Recap, and is going to have a pretty decent matchup against Dasher. Being able to steal away that Spirit Rush is big, but the big thing for me is the Gnar ultimate. That synergizes so well with Silas as a champion and brings you massive impact in team fights.
Yeah, and it also puts a little bit of pressure on Hawks here to not counterpick themselves by setting up for another easy ulti, which means that maybe Reiner's less inclined to opt into something like the Nautilus because that depth charge is oh so strong on Silas.
Yeah, the AP ratio on that is absolutely disgusting. And you could just one-shot people. Hey, let's go!
Okay.
The rail went unbanned, and Reiner locks it in. This guy is immaculate at this pick.
And this does give a little bit more space, though, for Rascal Jesto to project into mid-game and see how they can potentially counterpick that. You already saw the Gragas hovered, but there's other stuff like the Thresh, as well as, I think a Mumu as well, can do a really good job of disrupting this pick, as well as working really synergetically with the rest of Rascal Jesto's comps. And maybe we'll see some unique support come in. Instead, the Nautilus gets slammed down, pretty default for a lot of teams. He's the only... Other than the rail, which is seen specifically from Reiner, he's the only engaged support that has managed to maintain in the meta since spring, really. I think we've seen a little bit of a Mumi, we've seen a couple of Leonas as well, but by and large, it's been Enchanters for the most part in recent match.
I think the key thing for me is that Nautilus just brings such an overwhelming amount of CC, which is so easy to land onto people that you really can't deny the power of it. The fact that the depth charge is a point-and-click spell is just so ridiculous for ensuring that you're always going to be able to get those picks. You're always going to be able to catch people out. And when you've got as much mobility as the Hawks have, that Nautilus can get even more value.
Yeah, the scary threat for me with Nautilus is the amount of priority it can have pairing up with junglers or just in isolation ganking lanes, because that Q hitbox is absolutely insane. And as you're mentioning, even pre-6, his CC chain can be so important when you're pairing up in tandem with more CC-orientated laners. We're talking stuff like this Ari, which even pre-6, that charm combo can be very disgusting. Means that Recap's going to have to be really careful because Nautilus can gank from very inconspicuous angles, and he can set up for very early dives as well.
Yeah, can definitely get some funky things going on. I think both drafts kind of standard from both teams. There are a few funky things thrown in here and there, but
I agree.
I don't think anyone's going to be disappointed with the champions. Oh, I mean, like the Reiner Rel's a little bit funky.
Also, I know in Recap on Gangplank and Silas respectively, this is very much a more damage-orientated draft. Again, not something I assumed from them considering how they used to play in spring. So I'm excited to see how they pilot these champions. It does mean that because we are running a triple carry comp, there's a lot of pressure on Rascal Jester to not bleed out in one of their lanes. And both these lanes are actually fairly vulnerable, especially the Silas lane. Because of the way it likes to trade, he's going to have to be having a lot of priority from Hatcher Mecha to bring up support and vision, as well as potentially pressure out. So yeah, hoping that they're on point to set up for Recap to play as aggressively as possible to try and neutralize this lane a little bit.
That's going to be the game plan for Rascal Jesters as we are jumping onto the Rift for our first game of the day. And if that's the game plan, Oak, I wonder how it's going to survive when it interfaces with Blank and Dasher. Because before you were rudely interrupted to go into Champion Select, you were about to talk about how strong this pairing has looked this summer.
Yeah, Blank seems to be really on point. And something you told me, actually, which I'm just going to repeat for the crowd at home, is that this team in spring, very good performances individually at times from almost all players. Reiner being the only real reason why they won, like outright won team fights, like completely disgusting engages from this pick specifically as well. So we'll be keeping a highlight on this champion. But by and large, they seemed very disconnected from each other. But as summer's rolled in, this team has looked more and more together in terms of how they're playing. And I think the meta's really benefited from that, especially Kanatu being finally able to pick stuff like the GP and the Gwen, which is seeing so much priority now. So this pairing in the jungle specifically looking oh so good, and this really benefits Dasher, who has always had some of the highest stats in mid lane, very high CS. The amount of solo kills has been very, very high from this player as well. Now that he gets the pairing up to play as aggressively as he wants, you can see even now trying to push that lead as much as possible.
And it finally feels like Dasher has got this team around him that is going to be able to match to the level of gameplay that this guy's been putting out for years in the LJL. He was on the Hawks before the Hawks even were a team, back when it was Unsold Stuff Gaming. And in that time, they've never really been able to make a deep run into the playoffs. They've never looked like one of these teams that can contest the very, very top of the table. And being able to take down Sengoku just a few game days ago, I think really proves that this is a team that we need to be scared of.
Boy, Sengoku, I feel bad for them. But yeah, Hawks continuing to ever slowly grow space in the meta. I have to say, when the podcast hit at the start of the split, and all three of our founders predicted that this team would be fourth, I wasn't really a huge fan of that vote. I did not agree. I assumed they would have the same play as Spring, but it's been really nice to see them just form more cohesively and really start to identify their own roles within the team. And the shift in meta also has very much helped that.
Yeah, and I think if we look towards the sort of bottom half of the map, this is where we may be getting some action as Liner going forward with the crash down, propping that glacial augment. Solid Secret just backing away from the trade. But I think this bot lane is a really interesting place to focus on, because we said that it's Marble and to a lesser extent Reiner that have had to sort of step up in summer for the Hawks. And Soul and Secret are a duo that performed so immaculately well in spring and really haven't made it work as much in summer for Rascal Jester. We'll have to hope that that bot lane duo is able to fix a few of the issues that they've had and make themselves a dominant force in the LJL once again, as maybe looking at some action in the top side. No, Hatchemetcha backing away.
It's a shame, because this is how the NAR generally likes to play in these melee matchups, and very specifically with this fleet, shoving and keeping up fleet procs and proccing that on champions especially is so important for maintaining high HP advantage, so that Ina has no space to look for an all-in, to look to force this GP even the NAR out of the lane. And I think maybe the respect really given why Hatchemetcha didn't move topside was because of what we're seeing here. Blank was also on topside, and that 2v2 from the NAR and the Viego, especially when the NAR does have HP advantage, is so scary.
Yeah, talking about scary lanes, this mid lane has been going heavily in favor of Dashers. We may have to hold that for now, as Hatchemetcha is looking for a gank. Forces the flash away from the Ahri, who is now going to be down that summoner spell, so a little bit more vulnerable until she hits the level 6 mark, but has been crushing the lane so far, almost up 3 waves against Recap.
Yeah, has a TP available, is level 5 already. Losing this flash really doesn't mean as much as it looks like, because that Spirit Rush is so close to being unlocked now, and has played, honestly, the first 6 levels of this matchup very well. He now is on a very, that 1 minute timer, 1.5 minute timer to make sure he gets to level 6 safely, and we call this a good job from Dasher.
Yeah, I mean, I like this from the Hawks as well, recognizing that their mid laner is potentially vulnerable, trying to back them up, although if you die for it, it's probably not worth. Charm going down onto Recap means that he can't join the fray, and Soul slightly roaming through the river, but the play is just going to peter out.
Yeah, but with this Drake, we've got Hegsec Drake as our first Drake of the day today. We're going to be seeing a lot of pressure, a lot of trying to get vision advantage within the each lane's, the bot and mid side's wave state, because this Drake is a very pivotal Drake to be fighting over within this early game. Very impactful in terms of its stacking as well, and also it's one of the easier Drakes to take in isolation if Blank's able to get that priority from his lanes.
Careful in the bot lane. Blank is waiting in the wings. Soul does have the cleanse, does have the flash available, so it's going to be very hard to actually take out this zone, but no! Soul doesn't make it over the wall in time. There's just enough CC, just enough slowdown from Secret to save his AD carries blushes, and he keeps the flash available as well.
That cleanse was pivotal. Whilst it didn't look completely clean there, he manages to dodge out on Blank's follow-up CC, and that in turn lets him get away for free there without even having to burn the flash. So by and large, pretty successful to avoid that gank. They get to see where Blank is as well, but that doesn't stop him from clearing out vision around this Drake, and you can see immediately he's looking back towards his bot side. He's looking towards this Drake as well, as Kanatu's using the NAR ulti.
Yeah, maybe getting into a long engagement with Ino that he doesn't favor though. The mini NAR incredibly squishy, but Rascal Jester top laner, Doesn't want to dive under the tower just yet. Doesn't want to do anything too silly on the GP. Knows that the later and later this game goes, the stronger he's going to be. And you don't want to give any early advantages to the Gnar.
Indeed, and just had to double check. Gnar has not yet been nerfed on this patch. So just need that noted. I did say he had been. That's a lie. But with this fleet specifically, you can see Kanatu, even with that TP coming in, can get trade very aggressively with this summoner spells. Summoner spell? Rune. And that's really going to help him try and even out the pressure that GP level 9 is going to have. So there's kind of two spikes that you'd be looking towards with this GP. It's going to be this level 9. Then it's going to be the level 11 where he gets access to that reduced cooldown on the barrels and also that first item spike. So whilst GP is seen as this kind of more mid-game focused carry because he does get his items earlier on, so 2 item and 3 items will come earlier, those 3 specific spots as well will be keeping an eye for, because that's really when he can heavily bully out this Gnar lane and try and get some priority to secure second or third Drake if that gets around.
And I think Kanatu is sort of recognizing that, and that's why he's gone towards these plated steel caps very, very early. It means that you're going to be a lot better in the trades versus the GP, but it also means that you can actually chase him down with the hyperprocs, which is kind of a little bit of what we saw there. Reiner engaging onto Secret in the river, as there's no one really here to help out the Rascal Jester support. Is able to Spider-Man himself away, though.
Spider-Man. I don't know if it's the same. He didn't throw any webs out. It's a hook.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of a similar thing. Always going to be throwing out that hook onto Reiner, stunning him up as well, and the Rel has got nowhere out of there. So with First Blood, he's not going to be able to pick up Blank, though. And Marble back away in the bot lane. Doesn't want to be kill number 2. That's a lot better for Rascal Jester, though.
Yeah, really big to get that onto Soul as well. Remember, both of these ADs are cold starts, so getting the early access to gold combined with cold going to be spiking over the next 3 waves is very, very big. It's going to give that big boost and maybe get them that earlier mythic to support some of this skirmishing. As the Spirit Rush comes out from Recap.
Yeah, he's looking for an all-in onto Dash, but he isn't quite able to find it. The Hawks mid laner gets away fairly freely.
Yeah, indeed, and that's from Blank, just throwing out that hallowed mist. That was enough to be like, Recap's like, you know what, Nashi, I'm going to pass on that. I'm not going to take this fight. And now that ultimate's down, gets put on a full minute timer, maybe, actually, definitely, we see Blank immediately looking towards this Herald as the next pickup, because not only do they get the ultimate mid lane, also Kanatu has constant pressure in this side lane at the moment. I know not able to match the wave clear coming out from Mega Gnar. Even though he is now mini, he's on the cooldown as well, and Secret has moved up topside. I want to see if a skirmish starts.
Yeah, but it's just not going to happen, Oak. Rascal Jester don't think that they can match the Hawks around that Herald, and do you know what? I think they were right. So wise decision to back away, but it does mean that it's the Hawks picking up that objective, and even with the First Blood going in favor of Rascal Jester, it's the Fukuoka SoftBank Hawks Gaming that have got the goal lead in the early game.
Yeah, and this seems almost entirely through this mid lane, through the jungle, who both have been managed to build a significant CS lead. Now, Rascal Jester are trying to get the trade in return, and Blank did use that Herald to get the enhanced recall in, which means I think this Drake's been given away for free. Bit of an exchange there. I wonder if that exchange was necessary. Nonetheless, first Drake goes over to Rascal Jester.
Yeah. I think the key thing is, though, is hold on, Marble may have overextended on the bottom side. Oh, flash hook! Dodged away from by the Hawks AD carry, keeping himself alive. But I think the key thing for me is this Drake has been taken so late into the game. 10.5 minutes is, well, ages after we usually see the first Drake taken. It means that Rascal Jester don't have that soul as a real win condition that they can play towards in the early stages of this game, or even in the early mid game.
Yeah, it seems we've been seeing this in a lot of different metas where it's so scary to fight over this first Drake. It tends to happen around 11-minute mark, and then the exchange of Drakes happens. If we do see Drakes go back and forth, it means that Soul may not even come into this game at all. Dasher burns the Spirit Rush in the mid lane there, but that's in exchange for a couple of plates worth of gold, so I'm pretty sure he'd be very happy about that. And that's the first mythic of the game picked up. Unsurprising, really, because a 25 CS lead within the mid game, 11 minutes into the game.
I mean, it's like it's a couple of kills worth, right? Like in terms of the actual gold conversion, and I really like the Everfrost specifically here for the Ahri, because you've got enough damage for the rest of your team that you don't need to go super ham in terms of your itemization. A Viego and a Gnar, these aren't massive damage carries, but they bring just enough, especially on those 1-2 item spikes, to really take over team fights, as the Hawks may be setting up a play in the bot lane.
It comes in.
Reiner diving forward there with the attract repel, and yeah, Secret has just got nowhere to go. Blank is going to take over the Nautilus. Misses with the hook, actually, as Hatchemetra is roaming down. There's the Cannon Barrage as well. This is a 2v3 for Rascal Jester, but they're going to claim a kill. Blank going to be forced back away under the towers. Recap looking for a little bit more. The Heartseeker stolen away, but the Silas will not find the rest of the play. Meanwhile, though, Dasher picking up gold in the mid lane.
Indeed, kill exchange within the bot side. Recap moves down to secure to make sure that the fight turns around. He ends up burning the flash and being unable to find anything, but Dasher continuing to pressure up this mid lane. 30 CS lead now, getting those 4 plays in the mid lane. I think security here, and we get to see that Everfrost play once again. Everfrost, you're right, so much value this game, specifically because the damage is already on board, but on top of that, he's playing into 4 melee champions. There are so many people trying to get onto him. The effective value of that in team fights is going to be so high. We get the replay here now. I was very not energetic for this fight, but this engage from Reiner, very smart to punish a Nautilus, especially with this Glacial. It means that they're aggroing first. He is so squishy. Thankfully, Soul was on the forward foot, and the rest of Rascal Jester as well, combined with that GP ulti, we're very aware of, okay, we actually can find this return play here. It's only Recap who was a little bit disconnected here, who really wanted to find this fight at the end, and did flub out a little bit, but getting that kill trade so important, because you can see actually that gold lead neutralized quite significantly. And whilst we saw the mythic come in from Dasher first, now we've seen 2 mythics found in return. It's the Divine Sunderer onto the Wukong and that shield bow onto Soul. And this is really where the Zeri starts to see play, combined with that Zeal. Level 11, or hopefully level 11 soon anyway, is going to be where this champion really gets to kick into high gear.
Yeah, an interesting switch up in the lane assignments here from the Hawks, choosing to match Dasher up here in the bot lane up against Soul and Secret. I imagine that Rascal Jester are going to be moving around their members on the map to try and get Soul in an advantageous position, as actually looking for a little bit of an invade here onto Blank and Liner. They're not going to be able to find a kill.
I'm actually really happy that Hawks have rotated Marble into this mid lane early. It pretty much forces... I love Silverman. I think this champion's very boring, but very cool in how boring it is. The wave clear this champion has means that it almost has default wave priority, especially once you've got max points in that queue. Maybe a little bit skirmish. You can see the Hex Tech flash come in, but nothing going to be found. And yeah, the priority the Civic gives you means that Reiner basically needs to spend no time in mid lane, and gives him so much space to pair it with Blank or dash it if needed, especially with that Spirit Rush, and look for fights or look to get priority in other lanes, and in turn lead that to your next objective, which will be this dragon spawning in just under 20 seconds.
And I think that's really cool to see from the Hawks, a team that we characterize as a team of individuals in spring, being able to play a little bit more together, as Reiner getting hooked there. Not going to be caught out, though, as Soul and Secret making their way back to the mid lane. You are a little bit vulnerable on the Sivir. You obviously have that spell shield. You've got the flash. You've got the ultimate as well. But you are a very low-range AD carry. And if Secret can get on top of you, he can cause you a lot of problems. And the Hawks a little bit off in terms of the timing and giving over this second Drake to Rascal Jester.
I think it's also the spikes coming in as well. Nautilus, maybe it's just Nautilus. I feel like it's maybe just Nautilus. This champion is oh so strong, and you talked about it for a second there, but Spell Shield has very low value this game, because almost all of the spells that she will be shielding immediately followed up by something else in turn. It means there's a lot of pressure on Marble to Spell Shield something of high value instead, something like the Depth Charge, or potentially Recap coming in with one of the onslaught of ultimates he can bring on the board. So that's really where Marble finds space in some of these team fights, but really it's getting that Zeal item coming in. As soon as he's got the move speed from this PD, from something on that level, maybe he can try and start looking for skirmishes. But right now, AD carries leading from Soul, and that in turn leads straight towards the second Drake. And we're starting to see a bit of a win con come in, because this Cloud Drake got picked up now. We see Mountain being unlocked for the teams, and That's very scary considering you're playing into a Nautilus and Hatchamecha on this Wukong, who beforehand would have been very squishy. That Mountain Drake's going to give them a lot more space to try and find these skirmishes for their team.
Yeah, it's just those few extra resistances can be a hell of a lot more impactful than it often feels like. And Oak, it's been a tempered game from both these teams. I believe that is the polite way of saying it. A little bit slower paced. But the thing that always interests me in games like this is who's actually benefiting. Which team is looking at the slower paced game state and going, yeah, we're actually fine with this.
And it's very difficult to judge this, right? Because we have an onslaught of different scaling opportunities from each team. Now, my eyes ultimately would be towards Rascal Jester. I think this team always have been better at playing these slow scaling comps, and in turn also have the GP and the Silas, who once they get on 3 items and beyond can become very tricky within their side lanes. But so difficult to judge when we have Reiner on his classic Renata, Rel even, and on top of that we have engaged tank or engaged bruiser in the Gnar, and I think that can put such a wrench in your plans because you have that default of we're going to get Mega. This almost ensures a successful team fight once he's on 3 items.
It's so difficult to call, and in those sorts of situations it really comes down to execution. And if it's coming down to execution, the team that has been winning out on that this split has been the Hawks, only falling to DFM since their loss to Rascal Jester on day 3. That is incredibly impressive from a team that really didn't have it all together in spring, showing up in summer, really contesting with a lot of the top of the table teams.
Yeah, it's been interesting to see their climb so high now. And we get to see, hopefully we get to see a little bit more of that, a little bit more of this hot seat for Hawks as Herald now spawned. And we're going to see, oh wait, no, they already picked up a Herald. God bless, as we see Kanatu looking for the fight.
Yeah, might pick up, I know he has a lot of damage onto the GP, but in the top half of the map, it's Blank who's getting caught out. Recap with the other frost of his own, force the jungler from the Hawks under that top lane tower as towers are falling across the map in favor of the Hawks trying to get some of that standing gold.
Yeah, a bit of a set from Rascal Jester here, immediately succeeding 2 turrets in turn. This is top lane and mid lane tier 1. This gives so much space now for Dasher to continue doing what he's been doing basically all game, which has just been wave shoving and playing fog. Now it's very scary for Rascal Jester, especially once again, triple carry comp, a lot of vulnerability in these solo lanes, especially if they have already fallen behind. Cough, cough, recap. Now, a lot more space for Hawks to set up some of this more aggressive vision. We've actually seen Rascal Jester take quite a lot of control over this vision to maintain a pretty even vision line across the board, and also this is how they secure these first 2 Drakes. Now that these turrets have been unlocked, suddenly this wave clear priority.
He misses the dredge line onto a wall, and that means he's forced to flash back. That's not the worst cooldown to lose on your support, obviously, when you still have the Hex Flash available, but it means that in those scenarios in the river where both teams are looking at each other, Secret isn't quite going to be able to pull out that snap engage.
And this is right before this Mountain Drake as well. This is the turning point. First 2 Drakes given away. This is really when contention kicks into high gear. And they have Kanatu down the bot side as well. Mega Bar will be building, and they've unlocked the bot lane tier 1 as well. This is all 3 turrets now unlocked. And this gives so much space for Hawks to look for another skirmish.
I know needs to be careful roaming over. Doesn't want to be running into multiple members of SHG as recap. Waiting in the wings on the side lane, does have that Everfrost, does have the stopwatch as well, so playmaking potential on the Silas if he's able to find the right engage, but Hawks just teasing Rascal Jester at the entrance to this river. Dragon is on the table. If Rascal Jester can sneak in, if they can steal this one away, if they can fight the fight, then they'd be on soul point in this game, but it doesn't look like that's going to happen as Kanatsu going forward on the minion art isn't quite going Mega just yet, but Dasher
the
charm onto Soul on the backline, 30% HP on Hatchamecha, onto Soul as well as Recap steals away the Mega Art, but he's forced to dash away. Rascal Jester losing out in terms of the HP bars, and the Hawks happy to keep fighting.
Yeah, they still have all their ultimates available. Flash burned immediately. We're seeing the constant back and forth, but they have the Gnar ultimate. Blank is vulnerable.
Yeah, they're looking for the jungler. Going wide from Secret as Dasher Waiting on that charm cooldown, waiting to throw out another potential piece of CC, but Rascal Jester has managed to find themselves in the river. They found themselves in the pit. The Ultra Shock laser going wide. That's big.
Reiner.
As Reiner looking for the engagement. It's not as clean as he would necessarily like. Recap slamming multiple members into the wall as Kanatsu cannot get into this fight. He can't be the tank that they need. Hawks are being forced away by Rascal Jester as the Gnar can't go mega in time. Finally transforms to its soul, is going to be able to back up the damage with the DPS. Blank looking for recap, but gets CC'd, gets taken out, and Rascal Jester turned it around.
It seems like Dasher was aware the fight was going right. He walks toward topside and said he continues his game as Rascal just to find a successful fight. Ultimately, 3 for 1. They get the Drake as well, and this is sole point coming in for Rascal Jester. This team looked on point with their engage there. They knew even with HP advantage, they could continue to play for this fight. The point of contention really here is that after Kanatu, especially looking for the isolated pick on Ino, is that Hawks are down in ultimates now. Blank having to use the ultimate defensively as well. That Heartbreaker means that they are playing entirely off Reiner. This split stance from Ino is so important to ensuring that the triple carry comp that we've been talking about all game this far wasn't picked off cohesively. Reiner with the engage, but look at Ino on the backside disrupting, and in the big play, recap, stealing the Gnar ultimate, further disruption to stop all of the damage from Hawks being able to come in, because remember they don't have any ultimates to play through.
Oh, Secret maybe caught out here. Is going to get charmed, but can hook himself away, and that's the beauty of a pick like the Silas in these compositions where you have got multiple carries, can be that engage tool that on paper you lack, but when you steal away that Gnar ultimate, you are as good as an engage as any.
Yeah, and honestly, it's something we always highlight is when this Zhonya's comes in second, you want to make sure it's used effectively. Stopwatch is stopwatching Zhonya's, that invulnerability can be such an important team fight turnaround tool, and it was used oh so well there for recap to ensure that fight goes successfully. Now, even through these 3 Drakes and even through the 3 additional kills they have over Hawks still have the gold lead. And whilst we talked about the scaling factor from Rascal Jester being very, very scary, because not only do they have these scaling carries, they have the triple carry threat, they also have easier team fight engage tools. They have Silas ulti as well to play through depth charge and the Cyclone from this Wukong. An IE Sivir is so potent in skirmishes if she is able to get those W procs off, and combine that with an onslaught of individual pick tools from Hawks means that they managed to maintain gold decency now. We're seeing 2 items come up from Dasher. That Banshees is going to be so important, and still very scary for Rascal Jester to be looking towards these fights.
Yeah, but an AD carry that has already unlocked that Infinity Edge is Soul on this area, up in CS, and 3-0-2, 100% kill participation, having a pretty good performance so far, and we'll have to see if Rascal Jester can take this decently fed AD carry and put them in the right positions to win out in this game. Just about 25 minutes on the clock. Baron starting to become a real possibility for both these teams if they can find some initial picks.
Yeah, it seems like Hawks have also put a lot of their eggs in Marble's basket, because Dasher's opted towards a more utility orientated build, I'll say that, with the Banshees coming in second and then the Morellos being slotted as a third item. Now, I'm sure many would have some strong opinions on this. I'm not a huge fan of the Morello being slotted in first, but you can kind of see where he's looking towards here. We see triple healing coming out from the comp of Rascal Jester. Combine that with the Banshees, though, very low damage coming from Ari in a lot of these team fights means that Marble really needs to pull his weight.
Yeah, Dasher is just the pick tool. Dive in, land a charm onto someone. Honestly, kind of anyone with the sort of lack of tankiness that Rascal Jester have built into this composition outside of like maybe Hatchemetra and Secret. If you get anyone picked, you could probably chain that decently enough into a kill. And then if Blank gets the first kill in the fight, you can steal their corpse, start resetting all over the place, and it looks absolutely immaculate for the Hawks. But they haven't had the opportunity to do that so far. The fights have been a little bit too split for them, a little bit too conspicuous as Kanatsu making a play onto Ino. TP actually being invested by the Hawks to catch out the GP. And I'm not sure if you can 1v3 your way out of this one. Kanatsu with his first kill of the game.
very important to pick up there. They do have to burn a TP to ensure that that kill gets picked, but hey, Drake spawning in under 50 seconds. I'm sure Reiner's very happy with that. A small amount of priority that's going to give, especially because now Hawks, even through all this deficit that they've been playing into, they've been on point with setting up these side lanes proactively so that when fights start, Rascal Jester are bleeding out in other areas of the map. And we can see it here with Recap having to walk topside to pick up the wave. But because this top lane and these bot lane tier 1s still remain, that wave immediately bounces back again right on the timer for this Drake.
Yeah, and you can see that sort of coming to fruition here with the Hawks, able to get first rotate once again into the river. But the last time we saw the Hawks in this sort of position, Rascal Jester were able to force them out. They were able to find the fight. They were able to take down the Hawks and take away the Drake. If that happens again, it's Soul going over to the Rascal Jester, and that minuscule gold lead for the Hawks at this point in the game stops mattering completely.
But this is something we've seen from Hawks in summer a lot more. That adaptability has come in, and they hopefully noticed last fight that their incohesiveness of their ultimates was the impactful tool. This time they need to engage at the same time in tandem and find that successful fight. We just want to see how they're able to do that.
Yeah, Dasher level 16, big power spike on the Ari Kinatsu. Level 16 as well, about to go mega on the Gnar. Rascal Jester, they need to respect the initiation potential, which is going to come through. They can't get the steal on the Drake. Hawks are going to be able to claim that. Charm onto Attribute, a lot of damage onto the Monkey King as well as the On The Hunt has been prot. Kinatsu looking for the fight, but the Cannon Barrage enough to disengage the play. Blank. Beautiful.
Recap.
Seeker strike away as Recap can't quite get in. Another sick
Marble
charm landing from Dasher. That means that Marble is open to fire
Marble
out the damage. Already 1 kill for the AD carry. Make that 2 kills for the AD carry.
Marble.
And Rascal Jester are on the run.
Marble.
A goddamn pentakill.
Amazing play there from Marble. We talked about him being the only player that they... I mean, look at Dasher's build. He wanted this play to happen. He wanted Marble to be the pivotal turnaround for this team. And that single mistake from Recap, the flubbed engage, means that Marble identifies there are no more tools to stop me from playing out this team fight as aggressively as I need. And he plays around it perfectly, repeatedly walking forwards, using the ultimate to chase every member down and one by one picking off each member of Rascal Jester. That's a pentakill. That's the Drake picked up as well, and a secure gold lead found.
Massive stuff from the Hawks, and it was that man, that AD carry who came in with such high expectations in spring, didn't live up to those, but in this crucial team fight puts out the damage and wins it all for the Hawks.
And I think, you know, whilst Marble is definitely the highlight of this fight, finding the penta obviously, but shout outs to Dasher, who repeatedly, look at the Everfrost usage in this fight, repeatedly disrupting both Recap and Hatchemetra from being able to do their job, and that in turn leads to Marble being able to do this. And look at him, free hitting in every single fight. Rascal Jester, because they're so low, having to play so awkwardly in terms of how they engage because of the damage threat, in turn actually leads to Marble being able to make this aggressive play. And look at this, what a clean penta.
Yeah, and in a league of 80 carries, Marble well and truly trying to establish themselves. Already getting another fight. Ryder with a massive engage. The follow-up is coming here as well. And after that last fight, I think it's just going to be the Hawks. It's actually starting to get turned around by Rascal Jester, though. The Soul is able to find a kill. 4v3 on the map. But the Hawks don't feel confident going towards the Baron just yet. They turn their tails. They look towards this mid lane tower instead.
And remember, Recap has that Spirit Rush available in tandem with Soul being full HP. It means they could still potentially find a turnaround, whilst Hawks will probably continue to pressure. Something that's been very on their minds has been these side lanes, and immediately it looks like Dasher's looking for that reset. He's looking for the blue buff and maybe to get back into these side lanes, especially with double TP being available on both these players.
Yeah, as we're going to jump into a replay of what happened in that fight. Hawks kind of baiting around the Baron, just looking for the turn. As soon as these TPs have been drawn out, they go for the play.
Wow, and once again, Dasher has been on point with causing disruption in these team fights, immediately bursting out Secret. And I think the stopwatch really there from Secret was pivotal for Rascal just even finding this turnaround in the first place. Remember, Soul being untouched is the scary thing here, and this will be something we'll be keeping our eyes on through the rest of the game, because now 4 items on board, GA picked up as well, which if not increases the amount of threat that this player has, because Blank and the rest of this team are very focused on pick off this player once, because that's how they play through it. It's through the charm, through this hallowed mist, through the heartbreaker to quickly get that kill, go invulnerable or go through Zhonya's or whatever tools you have available, and then find the successful team fight off that. This GA is going to disrupt that goal so much, especially because Soul needs to be the target if Hawks are going to concretely get a successful fight.
Yeah, it turns the 3-carry composition into technically a 4-carry composition as you get 2 lives on the Zeri. Dasher going to be playing guard duty, but honestly, I'm not sure if Rascal Jester got here in time. Hatchemetcha can go over the wall. No way. Are we flipping this?
Oh my God!
Are we flipping this? The Monkey King steals away the Baron and gets out in style.
Completely illegal play coming off Hatchemetcha, and that immediately means that look at the amount of gold sitting on the map for Rascal Jester. I want to see them use this Baron as effectively as possible. We see the mid lane tier 1 unlocked almost immediately, but there's so many different points on the map where they can continue to look towards. We have Soul spawning in under 25 seconds. We have the top lane tier 1 as well. We're hoping Rascal Jester play through this Baron cleanly to cut away this gold lead from Hawks and try to find a little bit of play within this game again. As what fantastic play from Hatchemetcha to neutralize Hawks' aggression.
Recap might be a little bit isolated here as 5 members of the Hawks stacking on the bottom part of the rift. Kinatsu taking so much damage from the Ultra Shock laser there. And Rascal Jester with the GP barrels as well are going to be free to start up this Drake. The zoning tools are just too much now from the red side team, and no steal can come out from the Hawks, and Rascal Jester, after fumbling the bag, have snatched it right back.
Oh, and it's all down to Blank, really, from getting chunked out by a slew of spells. I think, actually, to be fair, the pocketing that Rascal Jester can do in this game is very strong. As soon as this vision gets denied, Hawks have to walk up with a multitude of bruises.
Yeah. And now looking at all of these like incredibly strong carries that Rascal Jester have drafted themselves, now that this game has gone a little bit later, and they're actually the ones with the 2 sort of big late game buffs on their backs, we could be looking at Rascal Jester taking down the Hawks, causing a little bit of an upset and potentially pushing themselves towards a 3rd place finish at the end of the split.
It's something we said might not even be possible at the start of today's, especially because of Hawks, who have been on this tremendous upswing. Now, I think this is really being realized through draft. I think we were quite critical of their draft on Wednesday. So seeing this now come out from them, this specific draft be a lot more cohesive in how they attack Hawks' plan is very cool to see, because this triple carry comp, especially, something I would have never recognized if they picked this within spring, and now in summer looking very good on it. I know also stepping up on this GP. I think whilst this hasn't been a particular highlight for him in isolation, remember Soul has been doing a lot of work in today's games, both AD carries have been, but his GP ulti within the early game was how they were able to maintain a relatively decent goal lead. A couple of GP ultis came in very clutch, and now we're seeing him on this 3 items suddenly creating so much space for his team, and especially in that last fight, single-handedly basically securing them that Soul point.
I mean, just the poke tools of the barrels and the Ultra Shock laser are just like, maybe they're too much at this point for the Hawks to legitimately match into. And if that's the case, then Rascal Jester are just going to be able to zone you away from every single objective that they go for.
Indeed, yeah. So now we have kind of a more cohesive idea of how each team are going to be looking towards these fights. We see really Rascal Jester on point to grab vision just before the objective and then use their on slew of disengage and disruption tools to find a successful fight, whereas Hawks in turn want to be on the objective very early on and making sure they're spotting individual players to get a pick of. We know what each team is aiming for, which means even with this Mountain Drain pick being picked up, we know that if Hawks get to play towards their goal, it doesn't really matter too much. I mean, this Mountain is definitely going to do God's work for Secret and Hatchemetcha to play a little bit more offensively, because these have been the 2 players that actually in the successful fights for Hawk were disrupted, were taken out of the fight fairly early on. Now this Mountain Drake comes in, they have a little bit more space to go, okay, actually I'm going to disengage, I'm going to re-engage with 500 HP and I'm going to last that little bit longer, you know?
The number of times that I've seen a Nautilus on about like 50 HP just get that last hook, throw it out and like pull someone back and then just die.
Yeah,
Those
depth charge
CC
too.
tools can be so impactful. The depth charge as well, like just with your last gasp, with your last little bit of life, locking down someone and taking them to the grave with you. We are back into game. Definitely took a little bit of a while to get going, but boy oh boy, Oak, we have been treated to a banger in our first game of the day. A pentakill on one side, a Baron steal on the other, and only one of these teams is going to find victory.
Yeah, it was a game that was nothing and then suddenly everything, you know, especially around these Drakes. And now with Baron coming into siege this top side, immediately Kanatu, after getting the shove, TP's in. He wants to be on point to be here for just numbers. Rascal Jester don't know that he's locked into mini form for a little while now, so they have to give a little bit of respect for that potential rage bar being built up. And in turn, Dasher on the flank as well, trying to do his role, but Hachimecha just human warding it up whilst they're trying to siege. And with this top lane turret being unlocked now as well, this leaves only 2 remaining tier 2s. And I think Rascal Jester's done a fantastic job thus far of finding the goal. They're trying to find the fight as well.
Yeah, but I know. Just able to flash away in time, Dasher dashing around. Not quite connecting with any of these skill shots onto crucial members of Rascal Jester. And that means that even with this Baron buff starting to fall away, they feel comfortable continuing the push, continuing to go forward. Continue looking for these structures. Those barrels from Ino do an absolutely disgusting amount of damage, but the wave clear that Marble's got on his back on this Sivir, 4 items completed, is significant. It means that Rascal Jester can't go any further forward.
Yeah, this is another strength of Sivir. Once again, going to pedal this champion out as hard as I can. One of the best, if not the best, physical damage wave clear against Baron. And that's so important because Baron does have that magic damage buff, I guess, for a few of the creeps, which means that having it, I mean, just look at this. Immediately, the wave is just gone like that.
It
very, very important for reducing the siege coming out. And with the Mountain Soul being unlocked now, it means that the next Drake we'll be looking towards is Elder. And boy, is that a dragon to flip. And whilst we saw the flip coming on the Baron, remember, Rascal Jester on red side, which means that Blank has a number of angles that he can play towards if Rascal Jester try to force the 50-50. And it gives a very easy option for Blank to look to flip the Drake in return. So it's going to be very tricky for Rascal Jester to look towards that as the next objective, which means they're probably playing off, once again, this Baron timer just under 2 minutes now.
Yeah, but I mean, the thing about this sort of dragon pit as well, specifically around this Elder Drake pit, is if you just all go in the pit and start it up, provided that you get the Elder buff at the end, it's very likely that you're going to win the fight afterwards. So you can maybe play a little bit fast and loose, a little bit more crazy than you normally would do. As looking at these AD carries, Soul doesn't have any boots anymore. Sold them, got that Runans, got the PD. This guy has got 100% crit and a hell of a lot of attack damage, attack speed, everything to back it up.
Yeah, so with this build coming in, he's going to be on, he wants to fight in lanes. It's actually very tricky for you to do PD as your boots replacement. And that's technically what, whilst the PD came in first, the PD is the boots replacement, really. And it's very difficult for you to do this boots replacement and not be on wave to stack up that PD first. Because if you don't have that Spectral Waltz passive, you're going to be moving very slowly, and we've already seen how on point Dasher has been with using that Spirit Rush very aggressively to immediately pick someone off and try and set up for that follow-up from Blank, from Kanatu, from Reiner.
There is 35 seconds until the Baron buff is available, a minute and a half until Elder Drake spawns. Teams could double dip on the late game objectives, and that would likely secure them the victory in this matchup, but you have to do it first. You have to get there first, as the Hawks are the ones trying to secure some vision priority, trying to secure some vision around this Baron, trying to deny as much as they can away from Rascal Jester, but Dasher always on the flank, always fishing, always looking for that one pick that could win the game.
And I'd love to, before we get this Baron spawning, hopefully before we see a fight, I'd really love to see if Rabadon's really is the pick up here, as they're looking for it anyway.
I know, getting charmed at the end to take it out. That's another kill for Marble. and it may be curtains for Rascal.
Oh my God!
Ultimate from Kinatsu, knocking multiple members into the death chamber.
Soul?
But it's actually Rascal Jester starting to turn it around. Look at Soul. Look at the damage that this Zeri can put out. Black gonna steal away the corpse of Secret, but falls down into his own grave. Dasher still full HP, but the charms not quite gonna land. An advantageous fight for the Hawks, but it's so damn close.
So unbelievably close. And remember, that's off the back of them getting the pick onto Ino first. With a triple carry comp, everybody's vulnerable, and that in turn is going to immediately not only get them a small successful team buy, but it also unlocks this inhibitor on a timer for 2 separate objectives. We are Baron live at the moment, Elder in under 10 seconds, and whilst respawns will be relatively at the same time, there is an emphasis on Hawks now to look towards it with 4 out of their 5 members available, and immediately they are TPing bait. They want this Elder.
Yeah, and I love this, looking over at Soul. He sold his Immortal Shieldbird to pick up the Gale Force because the active cooldown on that ability is not going to be available for the next 90 seconds. And
Wow.
Soul reckons that the next fight is going to be taking place in the next 90 seconds. Respawns have come through for Rascal Jesters, and both teams going to be stancing in the river, staring each other down over this Elder.
Indeed, and we see the vision control, the vision fight ever continuing as Dasher really wants to find this flank. Remember, it's how they found Ino immediately at the start of the other fight. The big thing is I want to see Hawks. Okay, immediately Dasher walks towards it. As soon as they have to play through this mid wave. They have another wave to think 30 seconds. If they're able to stall for 30 seconds, they're in such an advantageous position. Rascal just to know this. They're trying to flip the dragon.
Yeah, they're DPSing it down as fast as they can, but it's starting to
Dasher.
reset now. Only 5.5k as Dasher
Dasher.
looking for picks on the side lane. Does secure the charm onto Soul, but the AD carry this area is absolutely fine. Kinatsu not going to go mega in time before he gets slammed against the wall, but the Soul goes in favor of the Hawks, and they could just win the fight afterwards. Dasher missing crucially with that charm as Blank goes over the wall. The rest of Rascal Jesters gonna be able to escape, although I know on the run, not gonna be caught out. Rascal Jester lose the Elder Drake, but they do not lose the game just yet.
Indeed, but this is going to lead straight into the Baron as well. Rascal Jester, this constant back and forth of pressure. These fights around every objective have been so hype, and it continues so now. As Baron now being contested, recap down means that there is no chance for Rascal Jester to look for this steal. Even so, Hatchamecha's trying to make his way towards it, but it's not going to be for anything. That is Elder and Baron unlocked for Hawks, and now we're going to be keeping eyes watching how they try to pressure out for, hopefully, the finish of this game now.
Yeah, you've got a minute and a half where you are going to be significantly stronger than the Jesters. And I love this from Dash. We've been seeing this from him all game, just looking for these picks.
Indeed, and that gives so much space actually for Kanatu to stack up. And whilst Rascal Jester really on point to identify him as he's the turnaround point for this team fight now. They're splitting their goals. Elder's getting contested at the same time, and they exchange one kill for another. They're trying to find Kanatu, but that in turn leads to the Elder, and they don't even get the Nart anyway. So now in deficit and 1 inhib down already. We're going to be seeing how efficiently Hawks can play out the remainder of these turrets being left up.
Yeah, 1 minute on the Elder Drake buff. This inhib tower not going to be long for this world, but the question is, can Hawks force a fight on this timing, force a fight with these objectives? It looks like they're going to go for it, trying to end the game right here, right now. Stun onto the Wukong clone, that's not going to matter too much, but the wave clear from Rascal Jester is significant. Soul, stunned up by the Spectrum Wall, taking a lot of damage from the Boomerang Blade, as the Hawks still standing in the base of Rascal Jester, but that Elder is timing off faster and faster.
Secret,
Secret is already dead, and there comes the hook from Black as he's diving onto the back line as well. Rider on the rail, taking over the play. It looks shaky from the Hawks, but they still get the dub.
And honestly, after an unbelievable back and forth of the game, it's very hyped to see Hawks pick that up. But yeah, you say it seemed a little bit shaky from Hawks, but I don't really know if that's the Hawks' discredit. I think if anything, that's to Rascal Jesters putting up a hell of a fight, successfully managing to navigate the early game of a triple carry comp, coming in and securing very cleanly this Mountain Soul for their team. Meant that Hawks were repeatedly having to play above and beyond. And thankfully, we saw that come up from these players. Dasher repeatedly being the initiator for his team, using that Spirit Rush perfectly to weed through the edge of the fight and find key players. On top of that, Marble, once he got 3 items, was completely rolling on this Sivir and performed his role very, very well and found himself even a nice little pentakill within that game.
The first pentakill of LJL 2022 summer. And if you had asked me at the start of the split who would be getting it, Marble would have been a little lower on my list than I would care to admit. But an amazing team performance once again from the Hawks. Credit to Rascal Jester, but they weren't quite good enough on the day to get the dub. We are going to be jumping to a short break now before we break down that matchup in a little bit more detail.
Okay. All right. Production came in. They were like, yeah, we're going to throw something in that you don't know. But I love it. Banger alert indeed. So many bangers. I can't tell if it's the 5th of November or the 4th of July. Either way, it's popping off today. Rascal Jester Hawks delivered in our first game of the day. And it was a close one down to the wire. Had to go into the late game. But let's get into the draft of this game. And to be fair, no crazy stuff that I can see. I feel like all of it is pretty standard. I would say, yeah, okay, we get to see some Silas coming out from recap. That's pretty nice to see. And the Reiner Rel once again. Were you guys pretty happy with both of these comps?
Yeah.
Brilliant. I'll jump onto this then. Yeah, no, pretty happy with it. Actually, I love it. It's my keyword of this is my keyword. Cohesiveness of both of the drafts was very on point today. Both teams knew what they wanted to do with these drafts and actually played towards it very, very well. even saying that this was entirely Rascal Jester's fault as to why they lost this game, because when you are playing with a triple carry comp, you're very vulnerable. Each player has to play off their own positioning, and that in turn can lead to, it's something we see with Karma support a lot, right? Is that they do really well in lane, and then skirmishing starts, and then they're squishy Karma setting up vision by themselves because they don't power up properly, and then they just end up 0-5. It's the same thing with this entire comp here. Every player has to play around the onslaught of engage tools from Hawks, and Dasher specifically was saying, no, you don't get to fight this Drake here. Repeatedly on every single objective was doing his role, and especially once 3 items locked onto Sibir, that's really when the rest of the team were able to follow up on this. And that was really where Hawks' comp came into play, is that they have one player to play up for the initial, for that pseudo engage, and then it gives either Kanatu, if he's on Mega, or Reiner, who again, a fantastic performance on the rail. Can this man be stopped? It meant that so long as one of those 2 players is on point to follow up, they are pretty much secured a fight. And Dasher, what a man.
Oh God! Like we said it on the cast, it finally feels like Dasher has got a team around him that he can rely on, and I'm so excited to see what that means, not just in the remaining games of the regular split, but also going towards the playoffs.
Yeah, indeed. A really strong composition, a really strong look from them. And Rascal Jesters also looking pretty powerful. We said, okay, them losing to Axis maybe puts a bit of a spanner in the works. But to be honest, if they can keep up this momentum against other teams, they could definitely pick up more wins. Let's get into the first clip, because this game started off pretty well for the Jesters. We talked about them being good post 15 minutes. Well, we are 21 minutes in here at the Dragon fight.
Yeah, and I think I highlighted this in game, but I'd like to say it again here, is that right at the start of this fight, Hawks or Rascal Jester had this like long line basically with 3 aggroed on Drake, 1 playing in center river, and then Ino playing at the top side. And it means that Reiner has nowhere where he can target more than 3 people at once, and it really disrupts the plans from Hawks here, and was a really big initiative. You can see this here. Like, look at that line where Reiner tries to engage on Secret and Soul, because Soul is the biggest member of that team, but it's not enough for Hawks to find that. And then remember, this Drake was set up off Hawks of playing the aggression and burning a multitude of ultimates, and that's really how Rascal Jester knew that even with the HP deficit, all these ultimates are already taken away. They can find this fight cleanly.
And you see Blank on the backside trying to sort of make a hero play on to recap, and if he was able to take down that Silas, able to steal away his body, get the heal, get the steal away on the corpse, maybe there is a play for the Hawks on the backside of that fight. But I think that just indicates and encapsulates how close a lot of these team fights were, and it really could have gone either way in so many of the engagements.
Yeah, and then on to the flip side, things started to go the way of the Hawks, and we got to see something pretty miraculous happen.
Yeah, I mean, it's really off Soul being disrupted here, and it means that there's this constant back and forth pressure, because Rascal just know who they want to play, and then Dasher just doing his job so meticulously. I don't think it got shown here, but Hachimecha also, his HP picked apart by Dasher right at the start of this fight, and it means that Marble gets to completely run down this team with no available kind of return players to find damage point, apart from Soul right at the end, who, whilst killing Marble, this pentakill is found, and what a high pentakill to see here.
Yeah, and it's so impressive coming out from a guy that we did have those high expectations of coming into spring, underperformances, but then really showing off in summer. And we've praised him for going quite safe, having a low deaths and still doing a lot of damage. But you love to see the killer instinct flashing forward here on the Civic, going into a little bit of a 1v3 scenario. Yes, he falls down in the end, but I think if you get a pentakill, you're calling worth every day of the week.
Absolutely. I think his positioning in that fight there was absolutely just to perfection. Gorgeous. Yeah. And that's off the back of the 2 players of Rascal Jester can really influence him being immediately chunked up by Dasher.
And I feel like the mindset, right? You talked about this a little bit about the killer instinct, and it just takes me back to a quote of you guys. And I feel like he was just running down like, see ya, wouldn't wanna be ya. That's the energy that they came through with this game, indeed. And it did not end there. The drama was high for the game. It looked like the Hawks would pretty much take this one fully, but it was not to be. The Baron Steel coming out from the Wukong there, Hachimecha with a massive play. Then they allowed them to get the Mountain Soul as well, but it did all crumbling down when it came to the Elder Drake. Obviously, the Hawks being able to pick that one up. And for you guys, do you feel like there's potentially question marks around either team. Was it just a good game? Or actually, is it kind of a situation where, you know what, things are just heating up?
It's difficult for me because I think that in terms of a lot of the team fights, absolutely, like this was very well executed by both these teams. But for some reason, whenever the Hawks go towards a Baron, funny things happen, even when they're looking like one of the strongest teams in the league. The setup was a little bit rushed. Hatchemetcha obviously coming in to pick up the steal in kind of an expected way. You can just do that on the Wukong, go into the pit and get out. So definitely a few concerns, but I think overall, both of these teams, if they play like that versus your CGAs versus your Burning Calls, it should be absolutely fine.
Yeah, if anything, this is the credit of Rascal Jester for putting up such a fight. That's not to say they weren't aptly punished by some excellent individual play from Hawks, but overall, the way they navigated specifically this early game, I think really, really shows credit, because other than one lane, a lane that I thought would fall heavy deficit anyway, which was the Silas matchup, they all did a very, very good job on recap on something I would describe as uncharacteristic. I haven't watched enough of his summer to know for sure how much Silas he's played, but he looks really good in this champion. I'm very excited to see this pick get locked in again.
Hawks, they're picking up the win for our first game of the day. I'm very glad he brought up Burning Court and CJ, because they are up next. A banger match for 5th place. Someone is going to be getting out of the pack. We'll see who it's going to be, but go get a drink, go get a snack, and be right back. You do not want to miss today's action.